in the following ways. You will get ideas about how to support sibling connections and find families for sibling groups. You will learn creative strategies for engaging youth and families to raise awareness of the importance of sibling connections. You will discover tools you can use to assess and support sibling placement. It will provide information to empower youth with information about their right to maintain sibling connections, and it will also give you the opportunity to share your ideas for promoting and supporting sibling connections. On the agenda today will be James Damon with the Child Welfare Information Gateway. He is the Child Welfare Content Specialist, and he will be providing a quick overview of the National Adoption Month website. And then following that, we have April Curtis, who will present a child welfare alumna perspective on siblings. Following that is Kathy Ledesma, the National Project Director of Adopt U.S. Kids, and Tracy Lucian, Media Spokesfamily, who will speak about Adopt U.S. Kids Media Spokesfamily perspective. And then Phyllis Charles with the Child Welfare Information Gateway will speak generally about the National Adoption Month resources available to you. Now, I would like to turn this over to James.
Thank you, June. And we've designed this webinar to be as interactive as possible, and I'm really displaying the information that you will need to interact with us today. Note we have a new phone number that may be different than what you originally got when you registered. We are expecting over 450 people on today's webinar, but we are setting aside a time for questions, and you can submit those using the chat feature of your interface on the right side. And there's also an orange arrow if you would like to have a full screen view of the PowerPoint, and you can move that interface to the right. And at any time you have any technical problems, I've highlighted the raise my hand feature. You can use that to let us know if you have any technical problems. You can also press it now just to test it, and that way I can also see, okay, who is hearing me, because I will see, and I see a large percentage of people raising their hands, so that's always good news. And also we sent out a copy of the PowerPoint earlier today, and it has the links for everything that we'll be talking about today, and it also has a survey link at the end, and we would love to hear your feedback about today's webinar. So I encourage you to go to that link, complete the survey after the webinar, and this link will also be emailed to you. And now, just as June said, I'd like to do a quick demonstration, show you the National Adoption Month website. The most important thing that I'd like to share with you is the link. And like I said, in the PowerPoint, you can get a copy of it there and look at the site later. And I'm going to actually show you the homepage. This is our updated homepage. The news feed here will be updated continuously throughout the year with new resources and updated information. And we actually have a video that we recorded with Ju Young Chang, who is the Associate Commissioner of the Children's Bureau, and we'll be adding it in this placement very soon. And we've also added navigation for About National Adoption Month. That's always the most viewed section of our site, so we wanted to make sure that was in the navigation. And we also added content for families and youth, specifically birth families and adoptees. And we also have a brand new poll on the website, so we encourage you to go online on our homepage and take that poll so we can get your feedback instantly. And the bulk of the content that we have is in the For Professionals. We have lots of new content on promoting and supporting sibling connections, some of which we'll highlight today. And so I encourage you to spend some time on that section. And we also have really great, a great video gallery where we have state and local PSAs and digital stories. We also have national PSAs and digital stories. We have a section on children waiting for adoption, and we'll be updating these videos as well. And one of the things we've also added is frequently asked questions about National Adoption Month. And this includes more information about National Adoption Month and commonly asked questions, and feel free to visit those and see the updated answers that we have. And at this time, I'd like to turn the webinar back over to June, who is going to introduce our first presenter.
Thank you, James. And it is my pleasure to introduce April Curtis at this time. April is an alumna of the Illinois Child Welfare System. It was from her experience of being separated from her 3 siblings for most of her years in foster care that's encouraged her to become a very strong advocate for sibling rights. For a young woman, April has a long list of accomplishments, so I will need to summarize so as not to take up the entire hour. She is a graduate of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and she is a candidate for a master's degree from the School of Social Service Administration at the University of Chicago. She's currently a national child welfare consultant, but has a host of prior work experiences in the areas of youth advocacy and leadership. She serves on the Illinois Governor's Joint Task Force on Sibling Post-Adoption Continuing Contact. She's a past president of the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services Statewide Youth Advisory Board, has served on the Child Welfare League of America's National Foster Youth Advisory Council, and she is a founding member of the Foster Care Alumni Network of America. I could go on and on, but I'd rather that you hear her speak. So, April, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, June, for giving us, and thank you to the Information Child Welfare Gateway for giving me this opportunity to share my passion, my drive. As you stated, I was in the child welfare system for 18 years, and one thing I learned pretty quickly moving from placement to placement, that my sister or brother was not always going with me, and I needed to know why. I had to understand why were we being separated, and as I got older, I learned to advocate. And so today I'm going to talk about empowering youth with information about their rights to maintain sibling connections, and then just highlighting what it meant for me as a youth that was in care to be able to advocate and then to be on the youth advisory board to help other youth advocate for the same issues and concerns that are still prevalent today. My sister was adopted when she was 9 years old, and I quickly learned that we were going to be what they called separated, legally separated. A piece of paper was going to tell us that we were no longer sisters. And at that time, I was not happy about adoption. Adoption was like a taboo or curse word for me and my family. I have since then become a reformed adoption lover, and that's only because I found my voice and I found the ability to advocate and to hear from my sister's point of view that being adopted allowed her to have more family. But it was not without the separation, the anxiety, the frustration that we endured being separated. And even for my siblings, my brother who was in Puerto Rico, we were separated. And that didn't change. And how we changed it was to advocate and say, well, how many times a month are we supposed to see each other? And for how long? And where? And who's supposed to bring us together? And those are the questions that we began to ask, and I began to ask as a teenager while in care. And then quickly learned when I was on the youth advisory board that I was not alone, that there were other youth that were in care that were going through the same thing. So what we did in 2002 was propose legislation on developing a sibling right for children in care, so that we had a way of being able to say, this is our right to see our brother and sister. And one would argue there's that legislation and policies and best practice that's happening, and that says you get to see your sibling for, let's say, twice a month for 1 hour. That's 2 hours times 12. That's 24. And so out of 365 days, that's how we were connecting with each other. Again, that didn't add up for us as well. And so I said in 2002, our youth advisory board, we really spearheaded trying to get legislation. And what we did was, in that time, we really just pushed legislators in child welfare system in Illinois to just recognize that it's important, sibling relationships were important. That work didn't stop there. And so I continued to push it on a national and local level, and because at that time, open adoption was not an option. And at that time, It was a taboo word to talk about sibling rights, and we've come a long way since then, and we've reintroduced the legislation several different ways, but we got stronger each year, and we got stronger by the young people, and every year we went back to the Youth Advisory Board in the state of Illinois to say, is this still relevant? And it was. And we started to begin and have partners. We bring the adoption parent, the adoption council to the table. We bring DCFS to the table. We bring the foster parents to the table. There were birth parents at the table. There were legislators at the table. And it was really advocacy at its finest. And the core of it were the young people. It was their voice. It was their input. It was not happening without the youth, because it was what they were going through, and for the most part, what a lot are still going through. It's really about education and awareness. And so what this legislation, and I believe it's on the next slide, what it referenced was we were to create a brochure, a booklet, as you would say, to give to our brothers and sisters, to give to young people as they enter into care. And a couple of things came into play with this legislation. Upon entering into care, deciding whether to place the siblings together was a critical decision. And if they were not placed together, they're to come up with a sibling visitation and contact form that includes all sibling living arrangements. So I would know where my brother or sister was being placed. I would know when my next sibling visitation. My parents will know when that next visitation is supposed to occur. We also required that post-permanency sibling contact was strongly encouraged. And all that meant was that if we knew that the siblings were not going to be adopted together as a system, we were to do the very best in preparing both families and the siblings in getting ready towards adoption, because adoption was the option, and then what would a post-adoption connections look like. And that was bringing all the key players that are going to be in the picture to the table, and all the people who were going to continue to be in the picture after to the table. So the adoptive parents, the foster parents, the siblings, and in some cases maybe the birth parents. What it also meant was that siblings that aged out of care, so like for me, I aged out of care while I still had a sibling in care. It gave me a right to say, I still have the right to come to the table and say, can I see my brother and sister that's still in care? And it gave us more power, more as a, this is where we belong. I shouldn't have to wait until my sister aged out for me to see her. Other things was requiring DCFS to change their training and training all staff, foster parents, relative care, and people who wish to adopt or become legal guardians of DCFS, that they would go through this training about the importance of sibling relationships and about how can we keep siblings connected and what are we doing while they are in care. And so some of the things that myself and the young people came up with is we should be able to connect on phone calls. We should be able to call on every birthday. I should not have to wait for a visitation to say happy birthday. I should be able to pick up the phone and say, today is June 21st, I'm calling my sister. And how are we also doing holidays and making sure that in holidays, if it's not placed together, that they were also had the ability to be with each other and have the ability to be around each other. The most important thing was just giving the voice to young people and saying, my voice matters, my family matters, my siblings matter, because when the system is long and gone, and I need to know about my health, and I need to know about my cultural awareness, and I need to know about things that only my brothers and sisters may know or only my parents may know, that's what I want to connect with and have that long-lasting relationship with, because what research does tell us is that one of the longest-lasting relationships we have is with our siblings, and we want to make sure that we're still recognizing and supporting those relationships at the front end. And so it's being more creative at the front end while you still have the young people in your homes and in your systems to foster those relationships so that they're not trying to pick up the pieces, right, and figure out how do I find my brother and sister, or how do I connect with them, or do I know what it's like to see them beyond an hour? You know, one of the things my brothers and sisters and I started was every time we got to see each other, when we were all really together, all four of us, from Puerto Rico, from a visit, whatever, we would have a birthday. And so one of us was responsible for bringing a cake, and that's how old we were. And something so simple meant so much because that's when we were able to truly celebrate each other, because we were never in the same place at the same time when our birthdays happened. You know, we learned to celebrate holidays after the holiday. And so it's how are we as a system encouraging relationships to happen, and those simple things, the holiday cards, pictures. We often talked about how are you encouraging pictures during visitations, so that I just don't have a visual memory of my siblings. If we're placed separately, we should be encouraging pictures to be taken and to be at all the visits or some of the visits, or at least an annual family photo with your brothers and sisters. Something that, again, everyday people we take for granted, and we're doing these family photos, but that often our kids in care, our brothers and sisters, we don't get that. We don't have that. If it was not for one worker who insisted that we had a family portrait, that is my only family portrait that I have of my brothers and sister and my mom is when I was 14 years old. And that's it. That's all I have in 18 years in child welfare system of us together. And that, I hold true to it. I hold it and I take it no matter where I go, because that's where my family is. Whether we're separated or not, that's my family. And it was really important. And so those are some of the things that I encourage people who are working with children and placing them and doing the best. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're making that siblings are placed together within the best interests, right? But when circumstances don't allow you to place them together because we can't find placements or relatives to do that, it's what are we doing to maintaining that connection? And what are we doing to make sure that I get a phone call for Merry Christmas, or I get a happy birthday, or now we have Skype and FaceTime, and so technology is so advanced, and so should we. We should be advanced with that. I shouldn't have to wait that once a month or that once every 6 months to see my brother and sister, to see what they look like, see if they've grown or they changed. I should be able to pick up the phone and make that change. Again, a lot of the legislation that happened in Illinois was a continued work with support of just hearing the youth voice. And how are you encouraging the young people that you're working with to be partners and seeing them as viable partners and their voice and how it matters? Because I can tell you, they're going to be the ones to tell you the truth, that this is how it works for us. And sometimes we have to accept as providers and as service providers that maybe we're not doing it right and we need to shift just a little bit. And having that openness and that connection and being able to keep it real with our young people, because they're always going to keep it real with us. And really just knowing that at the heart of it, the core of it, all we want to do is be connected. All we want to know is if my sister or my brother is okay. I want to know if she's passed her test. I want to know if what does graduation look like for him, and not see pictures. I need to be at that graduation, and we need to make every effort possible to ensure that we are keeping the connection alive, and even after adoption has occurred. I am really thankful to this day that my sister's adopted mother made the conscious decision to keep us in each other's lives. It was not without feeling the fear that it may change at any day, but the fact that I was still able to see my sister after she was adopted at 9 years old, because let's just face it, we knew each other. There was no forgetting that. There was no changing that. And I would love more families and more children that are coming out of the child welfare system to have permanency, to have adoption, to have a connection, but to be able to know that they still can, no matter what circumstances, that they still get connected and they still can see each other, and they don't have that fear, or adoption doesn't become a taboo word because that's that fear of, I'm not going to see my brother and sister after that. We have to change that and really move towards being proactive and saying adoption is a great option. And these are the options that are going to support relationships and sibling relationships as well, because my family matters too. Thank you. And now I'd like to turn it over to Kathy Ledesma with Adopt Us Kids.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. As April said, I'm Kathy Ledesma, the National Project Director for Adopt U.S. Kids and a partner in the National Adoption Month activities, of which this webinar is a part. So thanks, June and April, for your very inspiring opening to our 2014 National Adoption Month webinar. As a former foster youth who was separated from her siblings, I hope you'll agree that April's story is a very compelling one, and we hope that it stimulates lots of conversation out in the field about the importance of us all nurturing connections between brothers and sisters, especially when they're separated in foster care or adoption. April's story really exemplifies how important the issue of sibling relationships in all of child welfare planning. April, other foster youth, and successful foster and adoptive families and their voices and their stories are a very big part of helping Adopt U.S. Kids to fulfill our mission, which you see on this page, on behalf of the Children's Bureau, which funds us. Slide, please. Operated seamlessly with the activities of Adopt U.S. Kids and in collaboration with the Children's Bureau and the Ad Council, since April of 2013, the Adoption, Recruitment, Campaign and Response Initiative, or ARCRI, focuses on the creation, production, dissemination of a national adoption recruitment campaign that you might recognize as You Don't Have to Be Perfect to Be a Perfect Parent, localization of the campaign of the PSAs, and assuring at both the national and the state levels that there are efficient and effective systems of response and engagement with prospective foster and adoptive families. The ARCRI has 3 goals, and you see the first 3 here. And James, if we could have a slide. And here are the second 3. As you can see, the ARCRI brings new resources that can help us bolster the capacity of Adopt U.S. Kids to assist states, territories, and tribes and the private agencies and adoption exchanges you partner with to more effectively recruit and engage new foster and adoptive families at the local level. And we have 2 primary strategies to put these goals into action on the local, county, and state levels. Slide, James. The first strategy, localization, has 2 components. The first is demonstration grants. We currently have 4 out there for a 2-year period to help develop some best practices that will eventually assist all states, territories, and tribes to garner donated local media, time, and space for localized Adopt U.S. Kids. You Don't Have to Be Perfect, TV, radio, outdoor print, and web public service announcements that encourage prospective foster and adoptive families to directly contact your local child welfare agency or your private agency partner instead of having to first go through Adopt U.S. Kids. And as an aside, I have to say, as a former adoption program manager myself, this is just a huge step forward and something that we have been planning for and working toward for more than 10 years now. The second component of localization is an option for all states, territories, and tribes and your private agency partners to localize the PSAs with your own agency's contact information. And this option is now available, and I couldn't be happier about that. Agencies from more than 20 states are already using that option. And if you're interested, please contact us after this webinar. The second strategy in the ARCRI initiative is to assist all states, territories, and tribes to develop speakers bureaus, which are an expansion of what Adopt U.S. Kids has long called media spokesfamilies. And that would include former foster youth, such as April, and I hope you agree she'd be an excellent speaker for you, and successful adopted families, such as Tracy Lucian, from whom you will hear shortly. Today I want to focus on this second strategy, a speakers bureau, as a powerful tool to help you recruit the kinds of foster and adoptive families you need for the very specific types of children and youth in your state who need families. Next slide, James. I don't need to tell you that on any given day in any state, it's not surprising to see a story in the print or broadcast media that fails to recognize the positive ways the child welfare system is helping children, youth, and families, but rather focuses on and often over-sensationalizes an incident that points to how the system is failing. We believe that having a professionally prepared group of families, youth, professionals, and others who exemplify the successes of the system can go a very long way toward counterbalancing the negative press and to encourage prospective foster and adoptive families to take that first step toward becoming part of the positive story of child welfare. Slide. Adoptive. Ooh, let's see. Are we one slide ahead maybe? No, one. Okay, let's see. Yeah, let's go to the next one, James. I'm sorry. Adopt US Kids is already working intensively with 4 states, as I mentioned earlier. Those states are Illinois, New Mexico, Rhode Island, and Washington, to help to identify, engage, develop, and utilize a diverse pool of foster and adoptive families, former foster youth, and others whose compelling stories both shed light, a positive light, on the child welfare system and serve to help recruit new foster and adoptive families. From our 12 years of experience of working with media spokes families on a national level, we are firmly convinced that diversity is a key element for an effective Speakers Bureau. What do we mean by diversity? So let's just think about that for a minute on a personal level. Who is more likely to convince you to buy maybe laundry detergent, a different one? For me, it's someone with whom I can closely identify, relate to, and trust. Well, this is the foundation of our development of a Speakers Bureau that can assist you with achieving these permanency goals in your state, territory, or tribe. Slide, James. Ideally, this diverse group of media spokespersons for your Speakers Bureau would include those who, as you see here, adopted or are children or youth who were 11 to 18 years old when their adoption, placement, or legalization took place. And we know that this is always going to be a target audience because youth in this age range tend to wait longer for families. And second, as a baseline, your Speakers Bureau should reflect the racial and ethnic diversity of the children and youth who require foster care or adoption. As important as these are, these 2 aspects of diversity for your Speakers Bureau are just the tip of the iceberg. James? Okay. You'll also want to include diversity with regard to languages spoken, having or been youth or children who have the same characteristics, who are in most need of families, as you see here. Also considering including families who represent the new face of the modern American family, families who have adopted children or youth in your target population, and this year our target population is siblings and keeping siblings together in adoption. Slide, James. Other aspects of diversity for your Speakers Bureau include religion and beliefs, both foster and or adoptive families, no matter which door the family first came in through. And again, we are looking to build Speakers Bureaus out in states that are reflective of the many ways in which we're all working to help children and youth maintain connections to their communities. Slide, please. As I stated earlier, Adopt US Kids and the National Resource Center for Diligent Recruitment at Adopt US Kids are ready to help you develop and sustain your own Speakers Bureau, drawing on our more than a decade of learning what works most effectively. Slide, James. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Tracy Lucian, who is one of Adopt US Kids' media spokespersons. Slide, please. Tracy has been a spokesperson for us since 2012. She's the adoptive mother of Taylin. She was 7 years old when she was adopted out of foster care in a different state from the one in which Tracy lives. And I would strongly encourage you to copy and paste this link into your browser and take a look at Tracy's story professionally filmed for your as a tool for all of you. And please don't do that till after the webinar because we all want to hear Tracy speak. So Tracy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I am so excited and thankful to have this opportunity to speak to you all today. God, I was so inspired by everybody so far, especially April. And so what I would like to do today is really share with you my background, how I got, what my adoption journey was, what it really means to me to be a media spokesperson for Adopt US Kids, and then just give you a little bit of background about, as a family, how I make decisions on what media coverage I'm going to participate in, as well as the invaluable training that I got from Adopt US Kids. And then also at the end, I kind of want to share my perspective on why I think that the voice of families is so important, as well as give my personal perspective on the sibling connection. So I am currently 53 years old, so I began my adoption journey when I was 48. I pretty much spent most of my my career focusing on work, and I moved up a lot at my company. But I always had a heart to adopt. And I guess at 48, I felt like if I don't do it now, I probably am not going to do it, and I just didn't want to have that regret. So I did go ahead and complete the foster care training and got the home study completed here in Maryland with the intent that I was going to adopt. Didn't know how that was going to work yet, or when it was going to happen once I completed the foster care training, but I knew that that was the direction I was going to go. And so I just happened upon Adopt US Kids' website, and, I'm going, oh, this is interesting, and I was looking through the pictures, and I thought, wow, this is a really good tool, and I typically like to take actions and not wait on other people, so I thought, okay, let me peruse the site, let me see, what are some of the needs, and I happened upon Taylin's picture. And at the time I thought, wow, there was something about her that seemed familiar, or I had an instinctive connection to her. Even in some of the blurb about her and what she liked, I thought, oh, this one might be the one. So I inquired about her, and then the state in which she lived, they connected with me. They gave me background about her. And then made the decision that I would be a perfect candidate for consideration for adoption. And basically they asked me, can I come, how soon can I get here? So I went and I traveled every month for about 4 or 5 months to visit Taylin in her state. And we just connected. And when it was time to relocate, I can't tell you how excited I was. And so I fostered her for about 6 months. And I won't say that the transition was easy. I mean, it was wonderful. We had to work through some things. But there was never any doubt in my mind that she was going to be my daughter. And so, 6 months later, we went through the adoption process. And so today, she is 11 years old, and we are doing really, really well. Now, since our adoption, I was so excited about adopting her that I did go back and send an email to Adopt US Kids and say, I'm just so excited. I wanted to let you know that the adoption is official and, we're now a permanent family. And so, subsequently they reached out and asked me, would I be interested in being a media spokesperson? Gave me lots of really good background information on what that would take and how to craft my story appropriate for the media, how much I wanted to share, et cetera. And so I said, oh, that's great. And when they first contacted me, they said that they had this writer from O Magazine that was looking to pitch an article about someone who was a little older and adopted, and basically had changed their life. And so I thought, oh, magazine, wow, okay. So because Taylin, at least at that point, was 7, I pretty much want to make sure that she is comfortable with everything we do. I said to her up front, listen, I got an opportunity for us to, be in O Magazine. How, do you feel comfortable, with that? I said, I think the story is going to be more focused on the fact that I'm a little bit an older mom, but, I just wanted to make sure she was comfortable with that kind of exposure. And, of course, right away she was just like, yeah, Oprah, oh, yeah, so that was great. So, I interviewed with the writer. The article, they had a photo shoot at our house, and so Taylin and I loved taking photos together. And, we were pretty happy with how well the article represented us as a family, and just, and the love that we have for each other was, perfectly captured, I think, in the photo. And subsequently, Oprah Magazine pitched the story to our local newspaper in the Baltimore Sun. And so that article, and that article was really focused on Taylin and I as a family. And so I did want to make sure that Taylin was comfortable having the writer come to our house. And we talked a little bit about how far she wanted to talk about her life. And it was a really special time for us, and I was pretty pleased with that article, and so was she as well. At the same time, I was doing things like, people at my job knew that I was, I had adopted. And so, I did do some blogging about what it means to be a 50-plus-year-old single mother. But I think that one of the most special things that we did, and I think Kathy had mentioned it, was this professional video for the Adopt U.S. Kids and the Ad Council that I think really captured the essence of who Taylin and I are as a family. And I think that really adoptive families really are a powerful asset to be able to give a voice to adoption. And I think that it will negate a lot of the negative the more that you can highlight successful family adoption connections. And I would say that to this day, we're still getting a lot of people who, were you in O Magazine? So I think that it had an impact. And often I have friends today who are very much interested in adoption, and so I've made a lot of, I've shared a lot about my journey, things that they need to think about. I've connected them with Adopt U.S. Kids when it made sense, just based on what their interests are in the adoption process. So I think that, I don't think that I would have thought that I would have the level of passion that I have about adoption, but I think that I'm going to be like April one day in terms of really advocating for adoption in a much bigger way than I am today. Let's see. I know I jumped way ahead, didn't I? Okay. So let me just say something, because I know that this conference is really about sibling connections. Taylin is from a sibling, has siblings that were adopted prior to my adopting her. So I will say that it is really critical and important that there is a family, that the siblings do have a connection regardless of where they end up. For me, I felt fortunate that her brother's adoptive family were open to this connection and this relationship, and even though we live in different states, we make sure that we stay in touch. We either I allow them to talk on the phone. She knows she can call her brothers whenever she wants. We make sure that on holidays we send gifts and we call them, and when it fits, we either go visit in the summer or they come here. So I think that what April was talking about, the sibling connection, it absolutely is important, and it makes a difference in the development of the child. There have been instances where I've noticed a level of sadness or disconnection from her, with Taylin, and it really has to do with she's missing her brothers. And so, I will always say, oh, you're missing your brothers? Let's, make sure that you give them a call this weekend. So it is so important, and I want her to know that, she's going to always have that connection and always know where they are. Now, as I said, I always reference and tell Taylin everything I'm doing, so I will tell you that I did mention to her that I was going to be doing this webinar, and I said to her, the webinar is about, what it means to be a media spokesperson, but at the same time, it's about sibling connections. And I said, so what would you like for me to share, or is there anything you'd like me to say on your behalf? And she said, in ending, if the child is able to speak about adoption and what it means to be part of a family, I think it's important to just let them do it. Now, I think that is just a really powerful voice of an 11-year-old, and I think we need to listen to it. Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity, and now I'd like to turn it over to Phyllis.
Thank you, Tracy. Your story as well and the way you maintained sibling connections for your daughter is very inspiring, as well as April, who's always inspiring in her stories. I'm going to now just point out some of the features on the National Adoption Month website to support sibling connections. And April already talked about empowering youth with information about their right to maintain sibling connections. We have it circled here in terms of where you might be able to find some examples. And then sharing positive stories with the media. Tracy, you certainly are a great example of that. You'll see the circle around and using assessment tools to help with sibling placements. James, maybe the next slide. One of the first link under state and local examples from the National Resource Center for Permanency and Family Connections, their information on siblings includes New Jersey and a number of states, but in New Jersey particular, there are siblings in best settings, or SIBs, that provides a protocol for families to be able to get more money for taking in sibling groups and a waiver for an exception to having large sibling groups. So look at some of the examples in that resource that has different examples of states and how they have helped to have families for siblings. And secondly, the next slide is an example of a matrix, a sibling decision-making matrix. This was put together by the Northeast Ohio Adoption Services Siblings and Brothers Together, Sisters and Brothers Together project, and it goes through their decision-making guide. And this is just a screenshot of some of their protocol in deciding about placing siblings together. So check out these and other examples on the website of how states are addressing this issue of sibling connections. We also certainly would like to hear examples from those of you who are listening in of other examples you may have of how you have helped to promote and support sibling connections. We're now going to move into the question and answer time. We have about 10 to 15 minutes to address some of your questions, and some of you already sent some questions in the registration, so we have some questions already. But just to test that everybody can still hear and use the chat feature, if you could please raise your hand for those of you who are listening as part of a group. So if you could just raise your hand if you're part of a group, and then put in the chat feature how many are listening in your group. So I'm not able to see that, but I think, James, you're able to see if people are raising their hand, just as a way to test it, and then use the chat feature to submit any questions as well as examples. So, James, were you able to see people raising their hands?
Yeah, it looks like we have about 15%, and it's rising closer to 20% of people attending as part of a group, so that's great.
Great. Okay. Well, we encourage you to continue to use the chat feature to submit questions. Some of the questions that came in earlier, and we may not be able to get to all of the questions, but we'll send out a document afterwards with links to certainly the PowerPoint and some of the questions that have come in. But some of the questions deal with how it's legal to keep siblings apart, even if some of them are adopted. And Kathy, I'm going to turn that over to you and April to respond to.
I'm sorry, I put myself on mute. Well, the National Adoption Month website, and I think Phyllis is going to put a link up here, contains many positive examples of how states have addressed this issue of fostering connections between brothers and sisters, especially when they're separated in foster care or are not adopted by the same family. Some states have put this into their laws, and you'll see that on the website, others in their administrative rules or policies, and ideally, all states either have or are developing a formal practice that supports nurturing sibling connections. If you've not yet begun that, National Adoption Month would certainly be an ideal time to do that. All adoption planning, all child welfare planning should be always based on the best interests of the child or the youth who are involved. Maintaining, nurturing, or even creating those connections when brothers and sisters are separated is always a best interest consideration. Therefore, I would say that planning for that ideally should take place even before the adoptive family is identified for the child or youth, because you want to make sure that a child or youth who is separated from their brothers and sisters that will be encouraged by their family, as you've heard from Tracy, encouraged by their family to maintain connections, and is willing to devote resources to make that happen. April, anything you'd add to that?
Just that the technical answer relates to the inability to force adoptive parents to participate in sibling visitation after adoption is finalized. Like in my situation, the reality is that a lot of the conversation went into preserving the relationship, but once my sister was adopted, I legally lost the right to visit my sister. It was truly up to the adoptive parent, and so there's no forcing the adoptive parent to ensure that those relationships happening. And so that's really why it's important and key to really work on this relationship building and potential other legal routes.
Great, thanks. Phyllis?
Yes, thank you. Great. And then there was a question specifically about children with Down syndrome or special needs that someone asked a more specific question about children with special needs.
Great. I'd like to address that if I could, Phyllis.
Yes.
In our experience at Adopt US Kids, a lot of families who have parented a child who has a specific condition like Down syndrome are interested in and very often are very ideal candidates to adopt a child with that same condition. And families who have approved home studies and that are current, as well as professionals, can register to use the Adopt US Kids photo listing website. And you can enter a search parameter that will allow you there to search for children with a specific condition. Likewise, you can, if you are a caseworker and have a child on your caseload who has Down syndrome, then you can go in and search for a family who is particularly interested in adopting a child with that condition. I want to add to that we had been contacted at Adopt US Kids about a year and a half ago by an organization that specifically works and supports adoption of children with Down syndrome. And I tried to find that link earlier this morning, and I couldn't, but maybe you could go out and do a Google search to find that site. It is a parent support group and does promote the adoption of Down syndrome, children with Down syndrome from foster care.
We may be able to send that link as well as a follow-up, Kathy, so thank you.
Thanks.
And let's see.
There's a question about how does one address a child when maintaining connections is not in the best interest of a child during a particular time?
From our perspective, a universal best practice in all adoption planning is to include the child or youth in the plan whenever his or her age and developmental stage will allow it. Child safety, of course, is always paramount in all child welfare decisions, including adoption planning, and decisions about whether or how to maintain connections between siblings. All discussions with children or youth, especially when you're talking about adoption, about why or why not maintaining connections is or is not safe for all siblings involved, you should always take care that that is an age-appropriate and developmentally appropriate conversation, and always center on that issue of safety and non-blameful language. And then I think we also always have to take into consideration the clinical issues for children at particular points in time that really point away from placing those siblings together. Even when for a clinical reason or for a safety reason you really are not well advised to place children together, as April has so eloquently said and Tracy also reinforced this morning, we really strongly recommend that you find some safe form of connection. April, would you add anything to that? I bet you're on mute.
Yeah, I was. No, you said it well. You said it well. Really just ensuring that we're being upfront and honest, that we're having honest conversations when it's possible. If you're talking to a 12-year-old and it's not safe for their older brother to see them, we need to be very clear and very honest and then respectful of the space that they're in. Sometimes we often overlook what our children bring to the table because they're in the system. And so just having open, honest conversations.
Great.
Yes, thanks to both of you. Here's another question about what are the most effective methods to recruit families interested in large sibling groups?
Well, Phyllis, I was really glad this question got asked, and I'm pretty excited about the answer, too. So, first of all, without knowing the whole content of this webinar, this person who sent in this question beforehand really is asking a question that underscores our belief that successful and supported adoptive families make the best recruiters of new families, and that whenever a prospective family shares one or more characteristics with a prospective adoptive family, there's more likely to be a response to that. So we include among the families that we employ as spokes families, families who have adopted large sibling groups. And we help them to shape and tell their stories in a very positive way. A second very effective tool is, and it sounds like I'm tooting our own horn here, but several very large sibling groups who have been photo listed on Adopt US Kids photo listing website have been adopted, and it's really very surprising. A relatively large number of sibling groups of 4, 5, 6, and in one or two cases, 8 children, 8 brothers and sisters. Those have to be very, very special families, and we do realize that not all states have policies that will permit that. So utilizing positive stories of families who have adopted these large sibling groups, when they can present them in their own words and through pictures where people can see that these definitely appear to be families that have strong relationships with their large sibling group, we believe is very helpful. And then we also, again, getting back to April, the stories of former foster youth who either were or were not adopted with their siblings is, again, a very powerful tool to get the thinking churning about, wow, adopting 4 instead of 1, if I am, in doing so, I am allowing these children and young people to maintain their strong sibling connection. That, I think, really makes for a compelling story. April or Tracy, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you addressed it perfectly.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah. And I wish we had more time for questions. I'm aware of the time. There's some other great questions about openness and strategies and research to help child welfare professionals do a better job of keeping siblings together. And certainly many of those resources exist on both the National Adoption Month and the National Resource Center for Diligent Recruitment at Adopt US Kids website. So I certainly encourage you to use the chat to send other examples or ask questions that can be followed up. But in the interest of time, Kathy, would you like to close out or maybe make a response to that last question before we need to say goodbye?
A response to the last question. Remind me what I was going to talk about there.
The strategies and research. Many of those things are on the website, so I think
yes.
that.
The National Adoption Month website for 2014, we put lots of work, energy, elbow grease, research into that to pull out the best practices and the promising practices that are real-life things from states that states have developed and are using and were generous enough to share on this website so that we all can start on step 3 instead of step 1 in improving our practices. So we very strongly encourage you to explore that website and all the links out from it. You're welcome to contact Adopt US Kids at our toll-free number or ask a question. We now have a chat feature on our website. We have staff ready to respond. Also, any materials that are on any of these websites you can download and print for your own use. And lastly, I think I would like to take the opportunity to say that one of the biggest and most important tools at your disposal to help you make National Adoption Month a truly meaningful part of the year is to network with one another and to reach out to those people, to those states that have provided information and learn more and learn the background information behind how they have been able to successfully implement a best practice. So best wishes to all of you. Phyllis, I think you're going to sign off for us, but on behalf of Adopt US Kids, I would like to thank you all for participating in this webinar, and we look forward to working closely with you in the future.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. And you'll see on the screen there is a survey, and we really would like your feedback. So please take a moment to complete the survey, and thank you for giving of your time today. June, did you want to say anything before we close?
And that mute thing again there, but thank you, Phyllis. Thank you all of you who have participated and joined us today. We really appreciate your time. And again, I also hope that this has been helpful to you as you plan your own activities for National Adoption Month. So thank you. Thank you, Phyllis.
And thanks to April and Tracy as well for taking the time and sharing your stories. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
This now concludes today's meeting.